years. So I will, I guess I'll ask the first question. Anybody else can jump in. You might get asked about Star Wars, so be ready for that. Okay, so at the beginning of chapter 3, the first thing you say is, behind all matter is donated spirit that is held suspended in space and time, so humans can birth independent consciousness. In the beginning, human consciousness was childlike and tied to the mother's apron strings. Our consciousness and the consciousness of the divine were one. And then you go on to talk about how we became independent beings. Could you just maybe give a picture of that?
Well, essentially, we all started off as group souls, 4 different types in the very ancient past. We actually grew on 4 different types of trees, as it were. But then we took upon those characteristics of the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the angel as group souls. And so we have now developed, since the mystery of Golgotha, since Christ's deed on the hill of Golgotha, that we have ego development that is donated by the Elohim, or the realm in which Christ worked out of on the sun, to donate our I am, our ego. Now, some people are not advancing forward. They're staying in group consciousness, and other people are going into Christ and group consciousness. So once you Christ into your I am, and you realize that you have 3 higher natures of your spirit, and you start to imbibe those and subsume them, take them into yourself as future aspects of yourself, you can move towards being a group soul that is called the Christ and group soul, or Rudolf Steiner calls the life spirit. So you advance into the realm of spirit self, and then into life spirit, and then the spirit human. So when you're in life spirit, you actually have risen above your own personal higher ego and gone into a Christ and group soul. So it seems strange to say that human beings can actually move out of group souls that were led by higher beings, and that's the reason so much wisdom was known in the past, to independently going back to those same higher beings that we came out of. But that is essentially what's going on.
So the picture I have is that we have become individuals and that become much more materialistic because of that, but also freer, more freedom involved there. Yeah.
Such freedom that we can turn our nose up at God and say, you don't exist in any form whatsoever. I mean, what kind of pride and hubris is that? That's the pride of fallen Lucifer. And that's why we're down in this realm of Lucifer and Ahriman. And we have to essentially rise up out of our egotism, selfishness. That's the greatest ill of our age, and rise into a realm where once we have a developed ego, we could then be selfless with it and share it with other people, and rise up into these higher realms where your true spiritual natures actually exist.
All right, Scotty, go ahead.
Okay, hi Douglas.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. In chapter 3, you speak of the advanced souls, whom you then outline in chapter 4 as to their particular theories of what the ethers are and the works that they put out, maybe their primary works. What I'm wondering, so Laszlo being the most recent of those advanced souls, I vibe with what his theory of the ethers are pretty well. And I'm wondering if there's anyone more current or still working on theoretical philosophy about the ethers that's not on that list that one could check out.
Well, first off, let me make a distinction about what you said. I wasn't trying to insinuate that the people that I put into that chapter are advanced souls. Okay. I was just trying to put out the fact that they, like, who knows that Einstein is useless without the a priori assumption of luminiferous ether? No one. I've talked to astrophysicists, you say this to them and they look at you like you're crazy. So I just put that in there because people didn't believe me when I started teaching this stuff to people, that this is the cutting edge of modern science. So if you go to the back of the book, you'll see other people who have other ether theories where they slice and dice up the ethers in every way you could possibly imagine so that they can be the first ones to discover etherons or, ether waves or this or that. If you go all the way back in time, the answer to every high spiritual question is, well, it must be in the ethers. And so we need to be more specific than that if we really want to have spiritual science and have a description of scientific descriptions of what happens in the spiritual world. And ethers are the bridge. In the past, they were called the tattvas. In the future, they call it magic. They refer to it as tattvas or ethers, but it's evoking elemental beings, etheric forces, elementary kingdoms. This is what it's all about. Now, is there anybody who goes in modern age to the point that they can absorb some of those highly developed people? For instance, you're absolutely right. When you go to read Etheric Formative Forces of Gunther Vaxmuth, or you read Ernst Marty's 2 books on the ethers, or you read, who else is really good? The Loom of Creation by Milner and Smart. That book is really old, but that's like the most advanced stuff. Or you read Richard Gerber, who is a friend of mine, his books, Vibrational Medicine 1 and 2. I could tell you a story about that one. But anyway, it's about, they haven't done any research. So Milner and Smart took Kirlian photography and proved all of this stuff, took pictures of it, did all kinds of scientific studies. Did anyone pay any attention to them? No. But you see, this is what happens. Science gets put into separate silos and they don't talk to one another. For instance, a book I'd like to make reference to is this book right here, Sun, Earth, Man by Theodor Landscheid, subtitled A Mesh of Cosmic Oscillations. No one wants to talk about this book. But if you ask who found the location of the supergalactic center, galactic center, and the center of mass of our own solar systems, they would say, oh, Theodor Landscheid and his books on Earth and Man, he took it directly from Rudolf Steiner's astronomy course. So when it comes down to it, people haven't taken even what Rudolf Steiner has said about these things. And the reason is, and the reason I don't recommend too many books, I try to extract from all those books the best substance for you so you can get straight to the heart of the matter without having to go through the controversies and debates that arise when you start talking about the shapes and colors of the ethers. Same thing with talking about the shapes and colors of your chakras, right? Every spiritual teacher you talk to is going to tell you a different story. You know how many chakras you have in your body to a psychic? 10,000. So if you want to start talking about seven chakras, major chakras, fine. But the reality is extraordinarily complex, and you have to simplify it. And that's the reason I went so much into the septenary division of everything. And in terms of modern research, I was thinking about this a lot before today's show. If you really want to study the ethers, you can only look up.
Got that one.
Get this guy. He's the best guy out there, I think.
I've got a signed copy of that book. He's awesome. He's the one that I paid attention to.
You see, Steiner said we're supposed to go out and see what modern science is producing. They produce raw data, right? You have to digest it. You have to put it into a cosmology. And if you don't have a theory of everything, and this is shocking, you know how many theories of everything there are? More than you can count. And yet none of them are applicable. Not a single one of them. They're all theories. But what we put in this book has been around since 10,000 BC, written down since 10,000 BC. And we simply brought it forward with Rudolf Steiner's work, took out the incongruencies of Vaxmuth, took out the certain negative aspects of Ramar Prasad's book, Nature's Finer Forces, took out some of the things that Blavatsky said and Alice Bailey said, and put them into a package so that you can look at it. And if throughout this whole book, I think eventually you all come to the same question, really, what's your point, Douglas? What are you trying to tell us here? And what I'm trying to tell you is it's all here if you know how to read it.
Okay, I'll come up with another one. Mostly in the 4th chapter, you talk about how the disorders of the etheric body have to do with the etheric body not meshing with the physical body. And we see that in young children a lot. They're tired, they're nervous, they're oversensitive. What do you think are the greatest challenges in creating a healthy etheric body in our students, and how can we overcome those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bruce. Great question. And basically, really, that gets into how pedagogic, it gets into healing pedagogy. But Waldorf education is healing pedagogy for all children. So, what we do with the children is the antidote. Essentially, what is it that we're doing with children? We're teaching them to breathe properly. According to Rudolf Steiner in Study of Man, what's the first thing he says? All education is a training in breath that must not be conscious. It must be simply good behavior, good habits that lead to healthy breathing cycles of contraction and expansion. And you think, oh, what a simple answer. That's such a simple minded answer. But literally, I said this last time when someone said, what can we do about the cataclysm that happened to your area? Good sleep, keep up your rhythms, do the exact same thing at the same time. And then when you change, make sure you preface it, tell them they're changing, and then change it so that everything is predicted for the children, so that nothing is a surprise and everything comes natural. So when you're teaching a lesson, the different parts of the lesson should literally be like clockwork. We never had to have a clock in our classroom. We all felt the exact moment when we needed to transition to the next stage because it was just rhythmic. It was just part of the breathing process. So breathings of having, if someone would have walked by my classroom when I was a teacher, they would have had different stories to tell. Sometimes it would sound like we were screaming and yelling with joy, and other times we were so quiet that they'd look in the classroom and no one was in there, and they couldn't disturb anybody. They all had their heads down. They were all working, including the teacher. And you have to go between these in-breathing, out-breathing cycles, healthy food, healthy water, healthy air. And as I said last time, you already have the perfect example of what you should be doing there. One of the reasons I love supporting what you guys are doing, because you have the etheric environment. That etheric environment, the best thing you could do is take them out to the pond and let them watch what happens to tadpoles. Let them watch cycles over periods of time, have festivals that you repeat over and over again, even telling the same stories over and over again until the 8th graders know the story that the angel is going to tell during the Advent circle. Why? Because these rhythms create the strength of the etheric body. The etheric body is built upon rhythms. Matter of fact, it is the rhythm of the entire cosmos put into an image that the child is bringing from above their head, down through their head, in through their throat, into their heart, and changing the heart that they were given at birth, the inherited heart, into the etheric heart. And later, the astral heart comes in through the limbs and changes that into the astral heart. And then even later, it changes again. But in the end, what happens, the heart connects to the whole upper part of the body until the etheric heart extends even up behind the head. So when you're looking at a child, you're actually teaching their higher nature, and you're teaching what the higher nature should understand. What's the highest nature on the earth? Okay, you're going to be shocked by this, but if you read Etheric Formative Forces, it clearly states it. It's the rising of the sun. It's the setting of the sun. It's the ethers that happen at the moment of the rising of the sun. Now, I described 4 ethers there quite thoroughly: warmth, light, sound, and life. But the Akasha ether, is the first breath of the sun. It's the first breath of creation. And this is what we're working with, transforming the human word, human speech, into what eurythmy does, which is showing music visibly, showing speech visibly. And as we do this, it becomes a sacred ritual, as Steiner describes it, on the altar of education. And we become priests and priestesses of literally teaching children how to breathe. And as I also mentioned last time, the pedagogical rule that if you want to teach a child's etheric body, then you would need to work out of your astral body, because your higher body teaches their lower body. So your astral body teaches their etheric body. So how do you bring etheric consciousness into the astral body? Well, you have to tame the dragon. You have to tame all your desires. You have to be able to have complete equipoise, as well as be able to tell segments of history so exciting that the children believe that they're witnessing them in their own imagination. So these are the things that are natural for us when we're dancing, when we're moving, when we're doing watercolor, when we're singing, playing the recorder, when we're doing choral speaking, when we're all of these things that we do, everything that you give out of your heart to these children, that's what heals them in this age. And I can go on and on. I've written entire books about, or we have written entire books about these things, what assaults the child. And you know what assaults the child. And I'm sorry to have to say it, these are old anthroposophic views, but all electromagnetic energy harms the human etheric body, period. It isn't a matter of how much harms it, all of it does. And so you have to draw your own lines in your community to what you expose children to. There are some countries now disallowing young children to even look at these devices because of the evil that's created from them, the depression, the suicide, the murders. Remember, the number one way you murder a child these days is through their cell phone and through the groups that they communicate with on social media. So you have to antidote all of those things. But the best thing you can do is to teach them what a rock is, teach them what a plant is, what an animal is, what a human is. That is the most valuable thing that you can possibly do to strengthen the etheric body.
My question is really just in response to something that you mentioned that sparked a thing inside of me, and it's about the rising and setting of the sun. And I want you to speak again about what that etheric energy is, because what it brought to mind is, one, how that moves around the planet, and then it brought to mind, you're talking about this etheric and then the astral being music. And I think what's the response to this movement is the dawn chorus, this movement of bird song that follows this rising of the sun all the way around the planet. And what is that, in maybe your beautiful words, what is that energy that washes the planet continually? It's like this juxtaposition of ether and song that I just think is, a marvelous thing. And I would love to just hear you wax poetic on it.
Well, what you just said is as beautiful as it can be said, and that's exactly right. All I can do is underscore that. But I can give you modern research that demonstrates what Rudolf Steiner says is true. That's a wonderful question, and that's the reason that the yogis and yoginis all greet the rising sun, because for the first 24 minutes, that's the Akashic ether. Then the next 24 minutes are the warmth ether, the next are light ether, the next are chemical or sound ether, as you pointed out, sound and light ether and sound ether, and then life ether, and then it starts the cycle again. So every 2 hours, these etheric tubes that extend from the North Pole to the equator from one direction, and from the South Pole to the equator in another direction, and meet at the equator. As the sun is rising, that's what creates the rotation of the earth. That is what creates the beings called the periodicity of time. And I didn't think I would ever get to this with anyone, but you said it. And so the only way to describe this is the following. When you read Etheric Formative Forces, it tells you why the earth rotates, why all spheres, planets near a sun or a star rotate. Because the dark side gets cold and longs for the sun. It's like heliotropism, but it's a planetary heliotropism. And so it is longing. It is love. It is the desire to be with the other, that causes the earth to spin. And you may think that's a very incidental thing, but if the earth stops spinning, then we would all know how that's a very important thing. So it's basically love. And I think I said this last time. If I didn't, I'm happy to say it again. When you look out upon anything beyond our solar system, Rudolf Steiner says you're looking in a mirror, and all you really see is the total and absolute pervasive love of the cosmos. So when you try to figure out what's beyond the solar system, it gets very, very complicated. But when you're trying to figure out what's on the earth, there's a lot of research on what are called magnetic transfer flux points. When I first heard about this a few years ago, I became a person who was jumping up and down talking about this. Now it's the big thing, and all the scientists act like they knew it all along. The earth reconnects with the sun every 8 minutes through magnetic transfer flux points. They're doorways that open up as these brilliant doorways of light in between the sun and the earth, the solar the sun-facing side of the Earth. And when they open, they've been able to track them now because they have satellites that can track the sound, the radiation of basically magnetic and geomagnetic forces. And they can see that they connect directly to the sun instantaneously, which proves that light in a continuum can go much faster than the speed of light. And Steiner said that in the astronomy course. So these little these transfer flux points, they now realize that there's a bunch of them, and they realize that's how all of the pull on the Earth to follow the sun. And now when you see the corkscrew motion of the planets following the sun, that is Rudolf Steiner's prediction, that the inner planets are on one lemniscate, the outer planets are on an adjacent lemniscate, and they are following the sun, and they are being pulled by, Rudolf Steiner said, a cord. And then he literally said, like a Masonic cord. And then he gives great detail in the math for this. So we now know that the sun and the whole planets all move in the way that Rudolf Steiner said. But what we don't know is that the ethers are ignored completely. All over the Earth, they're now hearing the ethers. When that starts with Akasha, and it changes from one ether to another, it sounds as if there's a horn that is blowing that is shaking the whole Earth. This is being noticed all around the Earth now. Why? Because we're at a solar maximum. Anytime you're at a solar maximum, all of the solar forcing aspects of the ethers, warmth, light, sound, and life, that come to the Earth are magnified: proton emissions, coronal mass ejection, so on and so forth. And so right now we have every single what keeps one ether from moving into another ether, which is the Akasha. The Akasha has grown so thin now between the ethers that we start to see manifestations that we've never seen before in history. And that's what many of these lights that we're seeing now are. We've been pointing that out. Those are plasma lights. They're light and they're chemical ether. And the ones that are literally taking form are chemical ether. And so, but that is only one part of the story. The other part is man-made things happen at the same exact time that the spirit is manifesting. So to disguise the spirit, you now have the largest incursion of drones in human history, because the FAA has yet to create any laws to control them, and soon they will, and that's on the register to be voted on soon. And when that happens, they will take away all drone rights in America for the common person. Because why? This is how you hide the spirit. You say that it's a mechanical thing that's happening. So when we're talking about, will science now take the next step with the ethers? Some science will, and some science won't. The science that won't will go towards dead machines that kill us. And they look like they're alive, but they're in the subnatural world. And machines that will actually heal us. And I will just mention one of them, Tesla's ultraviolet ray machine. It will stop pain immediately. I mean, soon we'll be using these things. I'm using one that's over 100 years old, and it still works perfectly fine. So we have all these technologies that will come in the future that are etheric technologies based upon John Worrell, Keeley, Tesla, and others, and what Steiner called the Strader device, which he put in his mystery drama. So I know that this is true, and I have friends who've worked on these things. And there are devices out there. There are technologies out there that help children. We created one that would create gamma waves, brain gamma waves in a room with all the children, so they would have super learning. And we actually created this device. It was a little too effective, so we're using it very sparingly. But these devices will be created in the future where children's etheric bodies will be re-enhanced because they have been so attacked in our age, and it's actually a frightening scenario, and we are in a battle. There's no doubt about that. That battle is not only on the physical earth, but it's in the etheric realm. And if we do not continue to do our job to nourish children's etheric bodies, then it causes materialism to darken that etheric realm even more. But what you ask is such a beautiful question, because everyone should go out at sunrise and breathe in the Akashic breath for 20 minutes, 24 minutes to be exact, and use it to really analyze, because that's what the yoga and yogini would do, is they'd use it to analyze the currents of the ethers in their own body. And that's what Steiner taught. though most anthroposophists don't know this, and that's what I'm trying to get to with the book, The Eternal Ethers.
You have other questions?
Well, I just
People
wanna-
who haven't
Yeah, I
asked?
just want to add on to that, just in that dawn thing, thinking of the ways that we can bring that into our own lives to bring to the children, but also the spur time. And then there must be that same magic in the morning dew, that it captures that first light, that first etheric thing. And that's why it's so magic to walk into that. And I can go on about the East thing, but I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to, it's another level of it's probably one of those 8 minutes is about the water. Don't know.
Well, you do know, because you are speaking from experience. I know from what September has told me that you all have been working with the dew. Well, dew was was collected by the alchemists in Prague, and they would dry it and it turned to a blue powder, and that blue powder is called the elixir of life. Dew itself is a gift of the elemental kingdoms, the 3 elemental kingdoms. And Rudolf Steiner said that we would be in tremendous danger when dew no longer forms. And there for a while, about 50 years ago, it started happening all over the earth that dew stopped forming. And my biodynamic teachers pointed this out to me, and it was extremely disturbing. So many people did a lot of things to try to bring the elemental kingdom back into the realm where dew, because remember, what did the Hebrew people live on in the desert? It was really a dew underneath a certain planet that caused an excretion, manna. Well, that is the same thing with what dew does. Dew is kind of like lightning. There'd be no nitrogen if there wasn't lightning. There would be no life on Earth if there wasn't dew, because the point of condensation would be out of balance again. And when that happens, then you have the rising of the waters from the deep and the sinking and the descent of the waters from the heavens. And we've seen this before, and this is now a big topic on the internet. They call it the mud floods. But the point is that this happens all the time. There's earthly water that's created all the time, and it comes up in fountains when we are at a solar maximum. So do not be surprised. We've actually seen this happen in places in the earth where dry lakes have filled overnight and so on and so forth. Those are waters of the deep. And so we are now seeing anomalies that are absolutely amazing. And what we need to do is take the children back to getting some ivermectin from the dirt, getting their hands in the dirt, getting the dirt underneath their fingernails, getting them to work with the animals. So the myth of zoonotic transmission of a virus is thrown out of science, mythology, religion completely, because there's no such thing. So what you're doing there, I applaud. I just wish I could be there sometime soon to see you. I'm going to work on that. And again, I salute your courage to be able to face what you faced in that area. It's really, it's a heartbreaking scenario.
All right. I'm going to ask the question. Where did the imagination for the lightsaber come from in Star Wars?
That's because they got wrong what I had actually designed as not a weapon, but a defense mechanism for any Jedi. And a Jedi was someone that was actually a mix of the 2 Templars, the 2 Jesuits, the 2 Fair Witnesses, and all the 2 different master and journeyman relationships that happened throughout all mystery centers and initiation. So the point is that that's the pineal gland. The Kyber crystal in the second treatment that George Lucas wrote, the Kyber crystal was just a crystal. He did not explain it. He and the girl, who was in his version was just a girl that he got. They went to the planet and they got the Kyber crystal and they saved the day. Okay, well, the Kyber crystal was actually, as Marcia Lucas and myself and others wrote, was in fact the calcium carbonate crystal in the pineal gland, which does protect you and does create a piezoelectric charge in the midbrain that creates more or less a shielding to your nerves and to your vascular system through excreting a hormone called pituitrin. So I was speaking about a real physical function, and the problem is that it can be taken quite wrong. And also, it isn't the may the force be with you, because that's really kind of silly. It's may the life force be with you, because there's also a death force. So the kyber crystal was based upon what you created. That's the reason that in the cartoons, they mixed it up as different colors of crystal. When the Sith had a dark crystal and the good guys had a white crystal, blah, blah. And when the good guys went bad, they had to get a dark crystal. Well, that's not quite true. But Rudolf Steiner was the first person to really point out that brain sand, which now they know is calcium carbonate crystal, not calcium sulfate and not calcium calcite. If they have either one of those in your pineal gland, you will have a problem. You are trying to do what is called the etherization of the blood from the heart to the head. And when that happens, you deposit calcium carbonate crystals there that have been taken through a very specific process, which we have in a book coming out here in the next few weeks called The Etherization of the Blood, which Steiner and Karl Koenig and only a few ever talk about. But it's the same exact process found in every mystery initiation center and every true initiation that I know in any path ubiquitously. It is about the development of your blood as the vehicle for consciousness. And how do you do that? So that's what was supposed to be described. The calcium carbonate crystal should create your aura so that nothing can penetrate it that you don't either use as energy or discard by sending back to its original source. That's the reason that the lightsaber sends the charge back to the place it was sent from, and the person shooting you gets shot with it because it's a mirror, and that's what it's supposed to be. Well, that was described in a few places in science fiction mythologies, but it's also described in Tibetan Buddhism, and there's a very specific way that you do that. So many things in Star Wars had to do with the questions of anthroposophy. For instance, Darth Vader was solely a creation of myself to say that the challenge of our age is, will you become a human machine? Will you become a cyborg? Or will you become an angel human? And so that's implicit there. But you have to see all 9 of them. And for those of you who are nodding your head, because really it's a children's story. It's a children's musical Western put into space. It's really a funny story. Chewbacca was his dog. And Yoda was never supposed to be his teacher. Alex Guinness left the set because he hated George Lucas. So they had Yoda step up to become his teacher, which is really quite humorous. But in the end, it became a Jim Henson kind of thing. And as you know now, Kathleen Kennedy, who I worked with for many years on Indiana Jones and other movies, as well as Star Wars, they're bankrupt. Disney's bankrupt in terms of ideas. And I'm just hoping that we can get back to something that does inspire people, even if in this particular case, Star Wars was somewhat of a silly show.
So I'm just curious, I'm reading your book and there's a lot of, strings and things, and it's out there and it's beautiful. It connects to things. And I'm just wondering, for someone who is a little bit more in the everyday nitty-gritty practicality sand, and finds it hard to venture out there when not in an off season of school, I would just love to hear your sort of, maybe just what, and this might be a big ask, but I don't think it is for you. Just sort of like the little almost mantras or things that you just would highlight and think are just really important to just sort of keep in the mind as we're working, and that takes into appreciation this grander spectrum of how important and vast the ethers is, but something that just more of a picture we can hold in our minds on our day-to-day work level.
Yes, well, my first impression as an answer to that question, or at least a response to it, is that your classroom is a garden of beautiful flowers. And your job is really just to take the nourishment of their beauty each day. And really, if that's all you're doing and you're doing your best to prepare your lessons, then it's going to be a nourishment for everyone concerned. But there are, on the Eternal Curriculum site, there is a thing called teacher meditations. And those meditations were given to teachers to enliven them, because it's a tough job being a teacher, and having to be somewhat pseudo perfect throughout the day in front of your students, and then try to live a normal life as you go to the grocery and make dinner. So yes, those meditations are there. So I highly recommend what is usually done in a Waldorf school is that the calendar of the soul is read. Now, the calendar of the soul is complicated. The calendar of the soul has a week that you're reading it for, but that's not what you're supposed to see. You're supposed to have the experience inwardly of the opposite time of the year. So then you read the opposite time of the year calendar of the soul and you go, what's Steiner trying to teach me here? And then, so you're reading what you see outside, the first one, and then you read the opposite one for the opposite time of the year that's happening in your soul. And then you read the one that's happening outside of you. So that little meditation changes with each week, and it's excellent, called Calendar of the Soul if you're not doing that. And then there are these 3 teacher meditations. Now, one of the meditations was specifically written for the College of Teachers, and it starts off, behind each of you stands his angel, softly laying his hand upon your head. That is on the Eternal Curriculum page, and it's there, and there's different versions of it. I find that to be very, very helpful as you're having a meeting and you're trying to really bring in the spirit that is beyond each individual edition in that room, that you're trying to bring in the spirit. So that is a wonderful meditation. And then there's these others, and the others are there also, and they're just wonderful because they awaken you to the fact that your sense perception in the classroom is what it's all about. It isn't about what you're teaching. It's about watching whether what you're teaching is having an effect. And hopefully the effect that you've been told by Steiner's indications is supposed to be happening. So they're wonderful meditations, and I'd highly recommend those to anyone. And if I think you can find them there on the Eternal Curriculum site. I believe I even updated that recently. If not, Bruce, I'll send them to you. And if there's anything else of that nature you want from anything that I've prepared that's any from previous studies or any books or anything, I'm happy to send it to you guys so that you'll have it.
We do read the Calendar of the Soul, but I never thought of reading the opposite verse, which is what's on the up page. Right by it,
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it's right on your page.
Yeah.
Can you
who
give
would
us
know
a,
that?
Can you give us a preview of the next 2 chapters, 5 and 6?
Yeah, I think you did that last time. So we're going to sneak into the area of talking about Blavatsky. Now, you might say, wait a second. Some people say that Blavatsky is evil. Well, remember, Steiner started off with Theosophy and Blavatsky, and he actually took vows to the esoteric section of Blavatsky. So it's in here. Now, then it would be Ramaprasad. Okay, now here's the trouble. The next one, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, there's only one thing I really want you to get here. And that's that when she's talking about the highest ether, Akasha, notice she calls it Fohat. And then she says Fohat is a being. Okay, now you're getting where you need to go. These aren't just forces. These are beings. And then to understand a being, you need to know its biography. So in here, Blavatsky shows you from the past, from the East, a really amazing picture about the ethers are called tattvas, but then she talks about Fohat. And Fohat, Alice Bailey calls the fiery magnetism of the solar logos. Well, you know who that is. And so in essence, though Steiner never once says it, one could actually assume that the Akashic ether has something directly to do with Christ and the second logos. So that's the next chapter. And after that, I'm going to dance through that chapter pretty quickly. Ramaprasad's view of the ethers and the tattvas, at his time, even, that was outdated. And Blavatsky said, be careful with it. Steiner said, be careful with it. Blavatsky's jumped up and down saying this is black magic. Let's remember that when you study the ethers or tattvas, you are studying the elemental beings that are evoked by magicians. That happens every time you light a candle. You see the ethers, warmth, light, sound, and life. And if you can analyze that and your perception understands that, then you see the fire for what the fire is. But if you don't understand what fire yoga is, or breath yoga, or any of the yogas, that they are just one of the elements, then you can really get caught up in it and it can be quite dangerous. So I will talk about Ramaprasad. I will not recommend that book to anyone. I have studied it thoroughly and I have practiced it. And it does work. But if you do it wrong, it is extraordinarily dangerous. And that's just, again, to show you, just like I did with the history, the ethers are all involved with history, with all the scientists, all the top scientists. And so the ethers are all involved with magic, or what the yogas has, the fakirs, these powers, these siddhas that they had, all come from the same place. But it is nothing to play with. Steiner said training of the breath should be unconscious. And all of this training should just simply be so beautifully described, as we've heard here today, understanding what happens at the moment of dawn or at dusk,